Professor Dr. Dhruba Kumar Gautam. He is Assistant Dean of Faculty of Management in TU. He is involved in various research and development programs in the field of HR management OB. Likewise, he has published various articles, journals, case studies, books regarding the HR. He is indulged in various research platforms like academia, ResearchGate, and so on. He has served being as budget expert, economic policy expert, and a revenue advisory expert member of government of Nepal from 2012 to 2014. He is also involved to forecast the demand of doctors and teachers for Planning Commission of Nepal to develop National Plan of Government 2015. He was nominated to high level task force by Cabinet of Nepal for HR projection, planning and strategy designing 2018 to 19 and successfully submitted to PM of Nepal. So I would like to request him to deliver his valuable words among us.
Thank you very much, respected campus chief, assistant campus chief, president of these programs, Saraswati multiple campus, and club of Saraswati multiple campus MBM program, as well as the total entire family of the Saraswati multiple campus and the other organizers, HRD professionals. Panelists of this program, Tanka Bhatrai, sir, and Richa Pandey and Dipesh Dahar, as well as all the participants, ladies and gentlemen. As the topic today, that I think it will be better to make the ice break to all of you. That's why I think the topic is quite relevant nowadays as the technology and HR. I think the HR here, we basically focus to the HRM, human resource management related issues and the relevance of the technology. This is quite interesting as well as the very relevant in context to the Nepal because we are suffering from the pandemic and the current situations of the pandemic, of course, clears the value of the technology that are essentials to every sphere of the life in the family purpose or as well as in the organizational settings. And we are basically linking to the organizational settings or organizational performance by using the human resources and human capitals while utilizing and deploying the human capital in an organization. Of course, at the current context, the technology are much relevant and we talk about the technology. That's why I first, thanks to the organizer and all those who think this topic and the technology and EHR that are relevant as current situations. A little bit, because I'm as a beginner, first explore some of the relevant issues that we'll talk as a panel members also concentrated on these areas as the very basically the first time even the many authors have been defined EHRM differently, but it has a different meanings. At the beginning, even in the 1986, first time the EHRM has been explained by one of the authors. That time the EHRM is just linked to the electronic HRM. Later on in 2003, the EHRM again defined. At the time of defining the EHRM, it became linked to the internet and intranet that has been used for the purpose of the human resource management in the organizations. In 2004, again, EHRM has been defined for the use of the planning, decision makings, controllings, and managing the every spheres of the organizational activities. So it became the more widely used in the human resource management and technology. That is the way of implementing the EHR strategy, EHR policy and practices, and the decision makings, and managing and utilizing the human resources in the organizations. That's why even the different times it has been defined differently, but the more comprehensive definition is that the technology that is basically used in the human resource management is not only for the human resource activities, it becomes relevant to the entire activities of the organizations. For that entire activities of the organization, of course, the most valuable resources of the organization is technology, not technology, but human resources. So we talk nowadays of the human capital, the competencies that possessed by the human resources, the ideas and knowledge that are inherent and governed by the human resources. And that competencies, ideas, and the knowledge the human resource possesses has been expressed for the betterment of the organizational results that we call very commonly the organizational performance. So why should we use the technology in human resource management? Why should we use the technology in the human resources? Obviously, as the objective of the human resources are very clear for the individual benefits, for the functional benefits or departmental benefits or results, for the organizational objective accomplishments, and for the societal benefits and the societal appropriateness and justice to the society, the technology are essentials and which we have to be used in the organizations. The term as the technology that we are discussing here in the human resource is of course relevant everywhere, but we concentrate to the workplaces. Nowadays, the workplaces have been suffering because of these pandemics and lack of the appropriate technology that we are not able to utilize. Therefore, I again link to some of the issues that agendas which we have to be discussed for the human resource management and technology, and those who scholars are here have to be engaged for the research to the technology and human resources is that first it has to be contextualized. The contextual issues are there. While discussing to the contextual issues, we have to be thinking about the convergence and divergence practices. And now the third wave is also there that we call even the regionalizations. Regionalization is one of the part of the divergent practices. No matter, therefore, the theoretically we should be clear about the convergence and the divergence. The convergence which we commonly discuss in the human resource management is the universalistic perspectives. That means because of the globalizations and the advancements of the technology, it is normally assumed that after some years, maybe the world's human resource practices will be the same. Exactly the same practice will be happening in the worldwide, no matter it become the developing countries or developed countries, no matter it is the rich countries or poor countries, no matter it is the Eastern or the Western, but the HRM practices will be the same. That is the convergence practice, universalistic practices. This argument is basically talked by the US professors, Western professors, especially the US and Canadian. They have argument that even the American and Canadian practices will be the worldwide practice that adopted because they have been done the research. And this is sometimes and in some situation looks the right, because we see that the culture are going to be diffusions and the world is going to be a similar type of the cultures. Might be after the 100 years or 200 years, the same cultures might happen to the world. That is assumed. Because even in the developing countries, South Asian countries like us, we see that many American cultures that we are going to be practice or Western cultures that we are going to be follow here. You can see even the examples as Valentine's Day, or you can see even the examples as the cutting the cake at the time of the birthday. You can see even the Halloween, which is going to be practiced in Nepal. We can see even the different type of the other cultures that Americans are practicing since long, which is going to be practiced in Nepal or America or Europe or Japan. Everywhere in the world indicates that the culture is going to be diffused and become the convergence of the cultures. Similar to these, the human resource practices might be the convergence in the futures. But the European, they have a different views. European view is that no, there is not a chances of the same type of the human resource practices that will be practiced worldwide. There will be the differences because of the contextualized factors. These contextualized factors means especially the cultures are the difference and the people are different. And because of these many other elements, cultural elements as well as the country-specific factors are the different. We see that the Japanese are more collectivist, whereas the Americans are more individualistic. We see that the Sudanian are the more feminine, whereas the Indian are, and even to some extent the Nepalese are more the masculine. Therefore, because of the different, this type of the inherent cultures of the nations and the politics and the economics and the geo situations, of course, the same practices, same HR practice may not be happen or may not be practiced worldwide. It is very difficult. Therefore, the European have argument that yes, there is a cluster of the human resource practices. That clusters of the practices means normally the regionalizations of the HR practices. And theoretically, there are also the convergence of the human resource practices. So we should understand about the context. The context is first the institutional environmental context, industry context, and the country-specific context, as well as, of course, the international boundaries and the practices of the international context. Even we see that while adopting to the technology in the human resource management, we have to think about the international practice and national possibilities. If the companies, of course, the multinational companies, it has to be think that, or if the company have a strategy to go to the multinationals or the multinations at the time, of course, the company have to think that which sort of the technology can be adopted into the other countries and which sort of the technology might be the quite relevant. Realizing these things as the comparative analysis of the technology, then only the technology can be adopted into the human resource practices. So in this sense, we have to think about the context of Nepal. What sort of the context we have to use the technologies. Really, our organizations are going to use the technology that are quite suitable to the international arena. Is that technology which HR is going to be practiced in Nepal is thinking of the organization as the universalistic or contextuals? What strategy the organization is going to be practiced? Similarly, we have to think about the technology. While using the technology, we think about the multi-stakeholders. Because in an organization, there are the multiple type of the stakeholders. This is the second theme that I'm going to discuss to you. Besides the context, we have to consider about the multiple stakeholders. Because you know that the organization have a multiple stakeholders. There are, of course, within the organization also the employees are there, line managers are also there, directors or the investors are also there, board members are also there. Besides these, other are also there, our layer of the organizations that we normally call even the suppliers are also there, government is also there, consumers are also there, and many other stakeholders that relevant with the context and transactions of the business and its volumes and the activities that prevail to the organizations. Therefore, while using the technology, we think about the multiple stakeholders also. If that technology is possible to use in the case of our employees, every employees are able to operate, can we retrain to the employees? Here, one recent papers that published from the Canada, and it indicates that even the 61% of the HR managers, they believe that their role of HR become more complex during the time of the pandemic. That means the pandemic, because of the pandemic, 44% of the human resources who are working in the organization need the retraining because they are not able to use the latest technology that forced to go by the pandemic. Pandemic forced to every organization to search and look for the best technology. And while using that best technology in the market, of course, technology adoptions and utilizations by a single person is not possible in organizations. Many employees and the stakeholders have to be able to use it. Here in the case of the Nepalese context, also the bank. When the bank staffs know about the technology, if that technology is not familiar to the customers or the depositors or the lenders, at that time, the technology adopted by the bank may not be properly utilized. To whom we are offering the technology? Who are really the end user of the technology? Realizing these, the stakeholders, multiple stakeholders thinking is essential. And of course, in the case of the human resource technology, it is basically the multiple stakeholders within the organizations. But in the case of the business technology, we have to think to the outer side of the multiple stakeholders, like the consumers, customers, suppliers, depositors, lenders, in the case of the bank, or in the case of the manufacturing company, of course, the inbounders or outbounders, or the operators, or the many other suppliers, and the distributors and others. So at the time of what technology we are going to use If we are using the technology in human resources, basically every employee working in the organizations in the different levels must be familiar and have to get the access of the knowledge of that technology. If we are using the technology to the business purpose, of course, the other business related stakeholders have to be able to operate that level of the technology. That is the essentials. So in considering these in context to the Nepal, we again have to be think and look for, search for, or do the research that for particular companies, what kind and what sort of the technology is quite appropriate that matches the need of each type of the stakeholders in the organizations. And again, the question remains as the third point that I'm going to share to you. The first, I talk about the context for the technology uses. The second, I talk about the multiple stakeholders. And the third one is, of course, why we use the technology in organizations. It is for the performance. It is for the results. It is for the benefits. It is for the goal secure. It is for the target that which has to be accomplished. So the target, when we talk about, of course, that because of the multiple stakeholders, multiple persons also have the multiple type of the target in the organizations. There is the one single goal of the organizations, of course. Then there are the different departmental goals. And of course, the peoples are working there, and these peoples also have the goals. So these peoples who are there, they also have the different type of the goals. The individual goals of the people have to be integrated to the organizational goals, and the organizational objective can be accomplished. Realizing these, we have to be think about as the accomplishment of the values or simply the results to the each stakeholders. That we call into the management the stakeholders theory. The stakeholder theory is normally assumes that the stakeholders who are engaged in the organizations, these stakeholders have to get the benefit and the values because of doing such particular tasks. Otherwise, of course, there is no motivations, no commitments, no enhance of such type of the inertia to the employees, as well as the motivate satisfactions is being decreased. Therefore, every stakeholders needs some benefit and value. Value might be of the monetary or non-monetary, no matters that every time it is not related with the monetary values or the financial values. Non-financial values like the recognitions, prestige, goodwill, and of course the appreciations and many other values that can be obtained. These values are needed by the employees, which sometimes become the monetary values and sometimes the non-monetary or explicit and implicit values are regarded as the stakeholders theory in the management. So these are the contexts which we have to talk about what sort of the technology in context to Nepal, and whether the all type of the stakeholders really can able to make a friendly use of this type of the technology in human resources. Basically, the multiple stakeholders we talk within the organizations rather than outliers, but the business stakeholders should be considered at the time. And the third one is its accelerations of the results, its productivity, its benefit, its values that are created to the organizations. These are essentials. So in discussing these, again, we have to talk about as the problems and the prospects. Of course, even though the problems remain everywhere, a lot of the prospects are there in Nepalese context. A lot of the prospects we see and we monitor in context to the Nepalese organization to use the technologies and retraining to the employees. And of course, this pandemic also creates some sort of the prospects to the Nepalese organization to force to go into the technology-driven societies and the business organizations rather than the traditional type of the organizations which we have run and operating since long. These are some of the issues that I raised as similar to these, the knowledge developments and the reskilling, training to the employees and imparting the knowledge and the technology, that is the training and development within the organizations. These are also the challenging to the organization when we are going through to the new technology, which has to be adopted in the organizations. With this, just thank you very much for inviting to me to these forums. Of course, I will be here, listens and participates with you all, and my expression and views related with some particular issues that are when required. Of course, I will be joined with you. Thank you very much for inviting to me. Thank you.